My fellow Americans, this is your former U.S. President, Barack Obama, and we're coming to you live from Art Portals. Today we're going to talk a little bit about inspiration, and we're going to talk about what it is and where it comes from.
Trying so hard, okay. Yeah. Inspiration. What is inspiration? What does it mean to
We
be
doing
inspired?
it? Right? Yeah, so what is it? What does it mean to be inspired?
Well, if you ask President Obama,
If you ask President Obama,
he will
he will
definitely,
definitely
tell you that, you know.
So inspiration.
What
is
was
it?
his
What is
slogan? It was like, change we can.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Or change. You're right, yeah.
I think it was change we can, something like that. I don't know.
think
I wasn't old enough to vote for Obama when Obama was running, but
I think
I would vote for
Yes
him.
We Can is Bob the Builder, actually. We're confusing Barack Obama and Bob the Builder.
No, but I think it was change we can.
No, but it's
Jamie, look that up.
can we build it? Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. And that's actually one great way to frame inspiration, because
I'm feeling
inspiration is something
jazzed
you
up.
build up and work
Yeah.
on and work towards.
Obama got us all real jazzed up.
Yeah, for sure.
Feeling good about everything. Ever since Obama came into office, big fan.
It's been like how many years?
Still my president.
10 years.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Obama.
Well, not so sure it's looking too hot within this next.
So if you wouldn't mind just
Presidential election.
not getting off subject here.
Oh yeah, it's my
So
fault.
we're going to talk a little bit about what inspires us.
Yes, and today we are really trying to get our lovely artists to understand what inspiration is, where it comes from, and how to channel that within your everyday. And this doesn't need to apply to only artists. This can apply to anybody. If you're somebody who's listening and is looking to let creativity in within every avenue, this is one great way to get started.
I would paint, but I don't feel inspired today.
Yeah, I'm not wearing the right shirt and shoes, so I guess I
Dude.
can't go to the studio.
Venus is totally not in the correct alignment with Mercury. I just feel like we're in a retrograde right now, and I just can't even bear.
Yeah. Only
To put
10
it-
people liked my story, so I guess I'm not good enough, and now I lost my inspiration.
Yeah, dude.
These
Sorry,
are, these are
would,
just
but-
like some of the very many excuses that people use when they are feeling out of inspiration. But
Inspiration is an excuse. It's not real. Don't fucking wait for it to happen. Go out and get it. Get it in the
exactly,
water.
going out and getting it
Boom.
is so important, because when it comes to making great art, it's not just about having this great commercial idea. It is having this lived experience and going out, being in life, going through even something, really challenging within your life is what can be used as a catalyst to inspire your work in the future.
Yeah, gotta go catch that wave.
Yeah,
You gotta get in the ocean. You gotta dive deep.
exactly.
You gotta go into scary places. Go into dungeons and fight dragons and also play other games.
Exactly. So wait, how do you get inspired, Rex? What is your way of getting in the zone?
I don't know, I feel like I'm not very interesting. I feel like I'm the classic, get in the sketchbook, tune out, put on headphones, and goof. But I would say that a lot of my inspiration outside of art comes from traveling. I like traveling, I like looking at new things. I feel like when I'm absorbing new information, I'm processing. I don't really think about it till I get back in the studio, but I am getting inspired.
Yeah, there's something about, not being in the physical practice of creating when you're in that mindset that you're going to go back and eventually create, being really in the moment with that. It's like you're always being attentive of everything around you. And traveling is one
Yeah.
really great way to get into that. So it's like everything outside of your practice always serves and goes back into your practice. So
Yeah, and I love plants, but I feel like I look at my plants in the yard too often. So when I go out and look at other people's plants or I look at plants in nature, I get inspired by those too. But tell me about your inspiration.
yeah, and I guess just to go back to that before I start, it's like breaking your average routine is one way to get inspired,
Yeah.
right? I feel the same way. I'm somebody who, like, I need that structure and routine to help me stay focused. But if everything is too linear, then I feel like I'm kind of losing that bit of motivation
Yeah.
and that focus. And so something I like to do is work on a different piece or have a thing planned for the weekend or after on like a random day, like going on a hike, talking to some friends, looking at some of my favorite artists. There's a lot of different things that I'd like to do, but something that has been a really huge thing for my inspiration is just moving all the way from East Coast to West Coast, coming to California, because this has been like one of my huge things. And it's crazy how just being here, there's been such a huge spark in creation. And it's most of my routine hasn't really stopped. Maybe there's been like a month or two period where I wasn't really like evidently working on the paintings, but within that period of time, like I traveled, we were packing, we were saying goodbye to our friends and family, and being out here has been such a huge change, and there's so many new things to look at, and that's been a huge source of inspiration for me.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, you got to break your routine. So sometimes you got to find your routine, break its legs, put it in the trunk of your car, drive it out to a river, strap cinder blocks to its feet, throw it over.
Hell yeah, it's a heist.
Just throw it.
Throw.
No one's gonna find it for months.
Yeah.
So that's how you get inspired. You
Commit
take
crimes.
you take a non-tangible thing and you murder it. And then you get into the studio and you feel like you got something off your chest. You got a lightness to you.
Well, that's another source of inspiration for you. It's like finding the light within the chaos. So it's like going through the most hectic thing that you can and then finding the positive thing within that and using that back
Exactly.
into the studio.
And if you're anything like me, your thoughts are out of control. So if you can make them even more out of control, then you find a sense of calmness in that. I think that's called ADHD.
Yes.
And once things are intense enough, you kind of calm down. You can reevaluate things.
So what is that like, having ADHD and still dedicating a studio routine, even though like, yes, things do get distracting, but how do you cope with something like that?
Loud music. It's very helpful. I feel like if I could explain it to someone, it would be like having all 4 burners on the oven and things inside the oven. Okay, so 4 burners on the stove top rather, and then there's a bunch of stuff in the oven, and then you're also getting a call from your in-laws and they all are coming over.
Sounds
and
like Thanksgiving dinner.
you have a meal that needs to be done in 30 minutes. You know it's going to take 2.5 hours. So that's kind of my studio process. It's just panic. Everything's on fire. Nightmare, nightmare, nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, I think that something I've noticed is organization is really helpful. So having a space for everything so that even when you see like, because through that ADHD process, sometimes you're just in like such a rush because you have like so many different mindsets and thought processes going through that things get scattered, and then you look around you and you really are like in that physical chaos. But having a space for everything is really helpful, unless the chaos is a part of your artistic routine, which then freaking go crazy. But I do find that with anxiety, for example, which is something that I struggle with, when things are out of place and unorganized, my brain is also out of place and unorganized. So when I take the time to like clean and put things in a place, it's almost this like nice calming, like, whew, I like this. Like, okay, now I can go back and focus on what I need to do in the studio.
Yeah. And I do love when things are organized, but in the words of Doug Stanhope, I don't think of it as a mental illness. I think of it as a unique personality trait. And that's how I justify it. I think that I'm happy. That's the most important thing. I get stuff done. Might take me longer than someone else, but hey.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of also weird mindsets that are had when you're like, oh, well, I have this mental illness, so now it's like debilitating me from doing what I love and I can't, get inspired anymore. When really it's all about just like, yeah, I have this crazy thing, but maybe this is just the one way I can feel alive through the process or work through what
Yeah.
I'm going through within that. And so I feel like it could be your worst enemy or your best friend, and it's really just about how you choose to have that relationship with it.
Yeah, recently I've been getting into coffee. I never really was a coffee drinker, but really enjoying it. It's really nice. I think that any prescription drug makes me really scared. So
Yeah, of course. I think like there's also like I think Huberman Lab talks about it, but like coffee can also help with focus depending on when you take it during the day. It's like you don't want to take it too early in the day, but then you don't want to take it too late at night. And I'm somebody who, like, again, with the anxiety, like, if I drink caffeine, my heart starts beating out my chest, and I'm like, all right, that's me for the day, you know? But that's another thing. Like, if I want to stay inspired and motivated, there's a part of me that's like, okay, what can I do and what I probably shouldn't do, which is, for example, not drinking coffee for me.
Yeah.
But I think ADHD does kind of help you slow down a little.
I like Huberman a lot. I feel like a lot of his teachings, though, if you can call them that, are just, this is how you become a productive member of society. This is how you fix everything wrong with you. And I feel like you're starting from a premise of like, I'm flawed, and I love myself. I don't think that I have anything that needs to be fundamentally uprooted and changed. I do like what he talks about with sunlight. I think it's nice to get sunlight. But again, it's the same way I feel about Jordan Peterson, where you're just getting advice on things as if you're a baby. And I'm like, I know all these, like, why are you telling me, why am I wasting my time listening to you talk about this stuff?
Yeah, I think it's really just about like how you take in the information, even with us, like really if you're like allowing podcasts to like rule your thought process, then you know maybe you should take some time to really step back and think for yourself. But everything should be taken with a grain of salt. But also you don't have to do every single thing a person recommends for you. It's mostly just like, here's some cool information, let's talk about it, let's break this down. And if you want to apply every single thing I suggest, cool. If you don't, great, you know. But really essentially it is pretty great to have somebody push you and motivate you. And so like podcasting, for example, is a great way to like listen to something and be like, hey, like I actually resonate with what you're saying and I want to apply this within my daily routine. And it helps us become better because sometimes we lack the community and that support system. And really that's what gets us through really difficult times, because we can be within our own heads all day and then that debilitates us from actually like progressing. So
I like to think of myself as the cool uncle that lets you drink in the house.
yeah,
That's kind of my approach to podcasts. It's just, hang out, drink a beer, let's talk about war stories or whatever. In my case, let's talk about skateboarding and play video games together.
And 5 grams in the dark.
And Barack Obama.
And Barack Obama. I think that's pretty true though.
All right, guys, stop fucking around. All of you calm down. So, what's the difference between inspiration and plagiarism?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I'll answer my own question. I think that it's important to look at other artists and get inspired, to get inspiration. And then, what you're going to want to do after you look at those things, assuming they're on your phone, put that phone down. Hide it from yourself. Put it in a box. Tell your family member to hide it from you so you have no idea where that box is. And then you're going to freak out. You're going to say, oh my God, where's my fucking phone? That's how I get inspired. Tutorial. This is my tutorial on how to be a better artist.
I mean, that's actually a great thing. Like, if you guys want, you can go back and listen to our focus episode. But if you are having a hard time focusing, like, you could just, you know, and the phone is one of the main aspects of your distraction. You could just find some time to just lock it away and move it out of the way while you're working. But okay, I want to go back to that. Inspiration versus plagiarism. Why is it that plagiarism is even a thing, and how do people plagiarize? I think that what we have to determine here is how early the artist starts out within their journey and where the artist is within their skill set. So for example, if you are a young artist, you just started learning how to paint and draw, most of what you're going to be doing is maybe plagiarism, but a form of it is mostly just inspiration. So you have to be able to identify what you really do. Because I think like when you're first starting out, you're first trying to find your voice, most of that intent comes from the people that really inspire you, that you really look up to. And so let's just say you have an artist that you follow and you know their whole thing is drawing the moon, and they draw the moon in this like trippy looking egg thing, right? And you're trying to emulate that same energy. So how do you take this concept of the moon, because artists draw moons all the time, and make it your own? Well, you have to keep working through it. But if you're looking at something and taking that as the exact reference from the way it is, and then just copying it without adding any of your own thing to it, not changing the color, not changing the concept, not, bringing some depth and meaning. Like, what does the moon mean to you? What does that represent to humanity? What does that represent to nature, And really breaking that down and trying to understand it, then that becomes a form of plagiarism because you're just copying what somebody else did. But that's their success, it's not yours.
Yeah, I was talking to a good friend who knows a lot more about it than I do, so we got to get them on. But they were talking about how intellectual property no longer is yours once it passes a 20% mark of change. So once you change a digital image by 20% minimum, it's your image now. But it's really hard to quantify that. So how do you measure a percent of change? Like, are you just making it black and white now? Like, how much percent change is that? So I think it also treads on a very strange territory of, are you making something new? Is there anything new? What is novelty, and how do you achieve that? And it also, like you were saying with the moon, like, are you plagiarizing by looking at the moon? No. But if you have 10, 20 artists all drawing the same thing, like the moon, you're going to get a bunch of different interpretations. We talked about this. Exactly. But I think it's also a necessary thing to steal from other artists. And obviously, stealing has negative connotations, but I had a professor one time in a painting class who literally was like, steal from the person next to you. I promise you, you're going to do it differently than them. Even if you're going at it with the intention to steal from them, you're going to do something different because you have different hands, you have a different thought process. Through the action of doing it, you're doing different brushstrokes. So no matter how much we attempt to steal something, we're always going to have that human element of change. We're going to alter things, whether intentional or not.
Yeah.
And it's also about intention. Like, if you've got negative vibes, you're like, this person who has 100 followers is making this beautiful art, and I have 10,000 followers, I'm going to draw the exact same thing, or I'm going to repost their art. Like, that is garbage, and you should feel bad. But most people, I don't think, are coming at it like that, especially when you're into creativity. You're going to go at it and you're going to try to alter it in some way, maybe give credit to them, shout out if you feel so inclined.
Yeah, I think that's when stealing becomes inspiration, because it's not necessarily stealing, it's learning. You're going through that knowledge of how somebody else uses their craft and their skill set and applying it to your own. For example, you taught me the grisaille technique. And I really appreciate that, which is, for people that don't know, grisaille is basically an underpainting technique where you start out with like a burnt sienna, you go in with like a grayscale. Grisaille is the grayscale, but there's the like sort of indirect painting method, and you keep, working through those layers of the grayscales, and you keep building that up. And maybe back then I would have stolen that, but that's not stolen knowledge. That is knowledge, period. But if I would have seen you do something and just did the same thing because I saw how successful it was, without trying to give it my own voice, my own change, that becomes stealing. Because it's like, how much of your own integrity and intention is actually going in? And then we have to really be able to distinguish, like, why is it that you are not trusting yourself? Because that's essentially what it all goes back to, is how much of yourself are you able to pour into this? And that's why inspiration is so important, because if you can go back and channel what inspires you, you get to see at your whole life process and see that kind of crumble into this one moment, because that's kind of how it feels. And you don't have to explain everything you've been through one piece, but it's just like this feeling that you're channeling through into the piece of art, and it's something that you build and you work towards.
Yeah, most definitely. And if you are looking to other artists for inspiration, I think it also begs the question, well, what do you want? What are you seeing in that you think resonates with you? And it's all going to come back to, how are you going to express yourself? And also, why? Like, why do you need to express yourself? What makes you so interesting that you need to say something? And maybe until you discover the reasoning, just keep making things. You don't need to worry about the ideology behind it. You don't need to worry about being inspired if you're just doing it for the sake of doing it. If you're saying, oh, I have 30 minutes free, I'm going to draw for 30 minutes. And if you spend 5 minutes of that 30 minutes looking for inspiration, you're really just procrastinating. You're not actually doing anything. You're spinning your spokes, and then you're going to tell people, oh, I'm busy, I'm drawing. But are you drawing? You know, you got to be honest with yourself and call yourself out. Have a friend who also maybe is in the room. They can call you out too.
Yeah, I think sometimes the illusion of the life of an artist seems a lot more satisfying than that work it actually takes to become an artist. And so people will try to self-identify with the success of it from the outside perspective, but they're not actually looking within them to see, okay, wait, this is what I need to do to become as unique and authentic. Because that is what art is about. It is about uniqueness. It is about authenticity. And like, again, it's not something that you should limit yourself from if you feel discouraged by that, because it does take a lot of work. It takes time, it takes patience, but it does. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier, the not good enough mentality. I think it's like really debunking that in like, yes, we are all works in progress, and when you are first starting out you will always be progressing, but it isn't something that you should put so much emphasis on, and the only way to do it is to see how other people progress and then copy that. That's not what it's about. You have your own route, you have your own thing and your own vision that you can do, and you can use people as a catalyst for inspiration, but then you have to recognize that that's not you. You're your own person. And really being able to trust that uncertainty and not knowing what that end result is going to look like is going to help push you forward through that.
Yeah, and being comfortable in the labyrinth that is partway through a painting, the ugly stage. You feel like everything is wrong. I think that that's where you should be focused on thriving, is getting into those spaces in time and just try to find your way out.
Exactly.
And there's the quote, it's like, life is what happens when you're making other plans. And I think that art is what you should be doing while you're looking for inspiration. You should be drawing, you should be making things. You shouldn't be waiting for some magical moment to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
You're always going to make excuses. There's always going to be some reason why it's not the right time. And if you're listening to this and you feel triggered, I'm talking to you directly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree
Barack
with you.
Obama?
I mean, that's the thing, like, and that's why it's so important to reiterate what it means to plagiarize, right? Because if you have this one or two or three artists that you really love, and you're just kind of taking parts from all of their work, regardless of, yes, this is your own thing that you're doing with it, you can still see the other person's artistic footprint through everything that you're doing. And so you have to be able to distinguish between, hey, I really like that I did this, but I'm going to continue to keep pushing it. And maybe not need to have to share and promote everything and market yourself so soon, because again, art is a process, you know? For example, people nowadays plagiarize with AI. And, you know, I think it's great to have it as a reference, but you have to be able to not identify fully with the reference. Like if you're going to type in this really cool complex idea, because sometimes we have really complex ideas, but a hard time translating that. Okay, use the AI. It's a super helpful, resourceful thing. But then once you get that, how much of that are you gonna actually change to make it your own? Because for the most part, if you're not changing much, most people can actually tell how it looks, and it doesn't look like you anymore. And so we have to really be able to distinguish between how much of ourselves we're putting in. And personally, I think it's also like a level of wanting to create these otherworldly images, and that is something that takes time, it takes patience, but I feel like there's more soul into a piece when you look at it and you see like all the layers and all the time and even the imperfections that went through it. Like I'm more personally interested in seeing that, you know, than seeing something that is like so perfectly manicured that you can just tell that, you know, this wasn't fully done by a human.
Yeah, I find that interesting too, seeing a piece of art on your phone versus when you see that same piece of art in person. You can really feel what the artist was going through while they were making it. And that's something I strive for, is someone sees it on their phone and they see it in person, and it's exciting in both regards.
Yeah. It's like that up close but far away sort of, relationship that you have with
Yeah,
things.
yeah, exactly. It should be the same way with tattoos. You should have a tattoo that looks cool from far away, then when you get up close, it's also got a lot of nice details.
Yeah. Unless you're like a impasto painter and like the whole illusion is like that distance, but then you get up close and everything's like rustic and messy. But there's something
Yeah.
also magical to that as well, because it's like the illusion of being able to play with light and value and bring that reality into things.
Yeah, Salvador Dali goofed around with that a lot. He had the painting of Abraham Lincoln, where it's all pixelated
right.
and you don't really see him until you get really, really far away.
Yeah.
So goofing and when you're working, walking away, looking at things for the first time, and maybe 20 minutes, and taking those strategic breaks so you're not swamping yourself in the soup of bad energy. You know, maybe you want to take a walk, get some fresh air, come back with a fresh set of eyes, send it to a friend, look at it in a mirror, look at it upside down. There's all sorts of things you can do to change.
Taking
Your
a
outlook.
break is such a healthy thing that we can do as artists, because again, like sometimes we so hyperfixate and focus on this futuristic end result, how it's going to look, how people are going to receive it. Is it going to be as good as this artist? Am I going to be as successful as this? Like, the only way we can truly embrace the artistic process is to understand that it is a process, that it's not just this overplanned, super high constructed thing that you already know how it's going to look when you start it. It's not about that. Maybe you start a piece and you're like, you know what, I'm having a hard time focusing, or I just want to hang out because it's a Tuesday afternoon and why not? And you go on a little walk and you see this ladybug and this freaking spider eats it, right? Some crazy thing happens and you're like, wow, nature is freaking hardcore. And that inspires you and you're like, wait, I know what I'm gonna do this painting. And it's like it's almost like sometimes if you're reading a book and you start to like lose track of what you're reading because you're thinking about something else in the back of your mind, and then you're like, wait, I have to go back. And within that process you start to kind of like have realizations, and that's what I'm referring to, is like when you're taking those breaks, you look and you're outside, you're doing other things that is implemented within your art practice when you go back. And so it's like everything feeds in to that higher calling, and so it's trusting that everything you do is for your better purpose.
Yeah, and those walks are part of the art process. It's not something separate. There's no outside the studio and then in the studio. You're always in the art making process. And it's important to remember that those breaks are just as essential as the time in the studio. And going to the gym, eating right, all that falls into the same category of strengthening yourself so that when you're back in front of your painting or your art supplies, you're ready, you can put all those excuses aside, quiet that monkey mind, those chattering thoughts, and get to work. You gotta work, bitch.
I think what's really difficult is that there's so much pressure put on artists, because nowadays we have to be our own creators, our marketers. We have to put ourselves out as far as business goes. There takes so much, and if you're constantly in that headspace where you are always pushing that one thing, then when you do take a break, there's something happens, like you start to feel guilty, like, oh, I should be painting, or I should be drawing, or I should be in the studio, I shouldn't be relaxing. And it's like, it's such a weird thing, and I know a lot of my artist friends struggle with this too. It's like we can't sit down even for a couple minutes because we start to feel guilty. But that's just like the capitalism speaking through you. That's the need to work and prove myself, or else, or I'm not going to be successful because I'm not working hard enough, or I'm not doing enough. And it's like, no,
And it's
bitch.
again another way to rip yourself out of the present moment. You're making excuses for why you can't be happy, and it's very difficult. But it all falls into that same process. Even if it's just meditating, that's all you do for the day. That's more than enough. I think that as long as you're making room in your heart, and you're going to work twice as hard the next day, you're welcome to take time off. But again, excuses,
They don't help.
it doesn't help anything. It feels like you're doing something when you're like, oh, well, I should be doing this and I should be doing that. But really, you're just tormenting yourself, and you could just be, I'm forgiven. I'm going to move on. I'm here where I am right now. And later is when I'll be in front of my art supplies where I can actually do something. But for now, I'm with friends. I'm going to eat this burrito and I'm going to shut the fuck up.
Exactly. You have to forgive yourself because you already work so hard. You're doing so much. There's so much society demands from you. You're one person and you're trying your best, you know? But if you know that you could be doing more and you're not, then give yourself the time because your body needs to relax and then set yourself up for success within the next day. Good habits aren't made by having a ton of freaking things to do in one day and doing everything you think you are supposed to do. They're made from commitment. They're made from time, being consistent with yourself. You know, if you have, like, I don't know, every time you take a shower, you throw the towel on the bed, the wet towels on the bed every time, and you're like, damn, I want to break this bad habit. Okay, one way to do it is just do it tomorrow. Take a shower, pick up that towel, throw it in the freaking laundry hamper, or bring it closer to your bed, right? There's all these little things that you can do to alleviate that, like, monkey mind, that habit of you going back into that repetitive cycle. But it's like, it's similarly with, you know, giving yourself time to relax. You have to be the one to tell, hey, I'm not doing enough, or hey, I'm doing a lot and I need time to rest. There has to be a healthy balance in between the two. So like if, you know, you go to the studio, but you spend more time like chit-chatting around, or you're just kind of like sitting back, or, you know, like listening to music, but you're not really doing anything, then okay, that's something that you need to be made aware of. And you're, the next day you're gonna be like, what can I do to help myself get really focused and start this piece? Why am I procrastinating?
Yeah. And similarly with the towel example,
Yeah.
here, towel. When you recognize that we are creatures of habit, then you can kind of reel back and unravel your own habits. So let's say you start every painting with a brown underpainting. Next time, try magenta. Try a lime green. Try something that's totally out of the ordinary. So then you're forced to fix your mistakes. Fail, fail, fail. And then figure out how to pick up those pieces. Intentionally start a shitty painting. I say it all the time, but like, it's the best way to figure out and be grateful for making beautiful art. It helps you break these various support structures that we've built, all these shortcuts that we've created in our art process, and it seems like they're helpful. You're more weathered, you're learning new things, and you're finding new, but really what you're doing is you're just making excuses to not think. And of course, as fun as it is to shut off your brain, it also is so important to be analytical and push yourself out of those restraints and those crutches that you give yourself and those excuses that you make in the studio. It's not always about making a beautiful piece. It's a lot of the time just showing up. And then that one mistake that you made and the way that you found out how to get out of that is going to give you inspiration. It's going to give you the tools that you need in the future. Maybe it's 10 years from now that you'll find this tip to be useful, but right now it's where you're at. And the mess that you made is the current issue at hand. So if you're constantly sprawling back in time, you're like, oh, well, what I've done to paint fingers before is I started with these hot dogs and then I carved out little lines for the shadows and then I've added fingernails. But what if you start entirely differently? What if you start from the inside out? You start with the bones and then you add skin on top. There's so many different approaches to things, and we don't even really think about it, but we've created all of these paths, these grooves that we feel like are comfortable, and they're these tire tracks from previous expeditions we've gone on. But what happens when you go off the path? It feels kind of scary, it feels bumpy, it feels like, oh, where's this gonna go? But that's where real growth happens, is in those strange and unusual places.
That's when inspiration starts to be a self-made process. It's a personal experience, because we have experiences from others, but we are a part of that creative bank. You know, we all kind of tap into this higher power. I truly believe that art is, you know, something that if one person doesn't, you know, commit to this idea and create it, it's going to find itself through somebody else. Because sometimes I look at an artist and I'm like, hey, I've done something like this and I have never seen their work, and you know, you see it and you're like, wait. And so it's like, are they plagiarizing? Like, no, like that's like that bank of creativity that everyone has the access and ability to tap into. It's just really how attentive are you to yourself and to your process. And once you can channel that, then it's a lot easier for you to kind of work through that inspiration. And so again, it's like inspiration is your creativity, and it is you. It is you. It is everything that you are, you know. And some people, like for example, they have really traumatic upbringings and they create all their art because of this trauma, but then, you know, when it comes to kind of breaking that and trying to do something else and working through that healing, they don't have that same spark, and that's because their source of creativity came from the trauma. And you know, I think that there's ways to kind of work through it, but as artists we should be learning not only to express ourselves, but to grow with ourselves within that practice. So it's like, yes, this is something that was really hard for me in my life and I created this, but what can I learn from this experience so that I continue to grow with the art? Because art is a lifelong journey. It's not just like, okay, I have to make this one really awesome idea and image and like that's what's going to make me famous and now everybody's going to know me and I'm going to be like the next Dali, you know, like there's plenty of those people out there in the world. It's not about that.
Totally. Yeah, I like what you said. I think that if you're looking for inspiration, I think looking at other people's work is absolutely helpful, but it also is a way of undermining your own potential and looking at other people and comparing and measuring. And it can be detrimental, and it can prevent you from getting back up on the horse and trying it in your own way. And if you've decided, I don't have inspiration, I can't do X, Y, and Z today, then maybe the problem is you. And maybe the time to reflect on it is now, or maybe it's time to try a new approach. And like I said, try a new technique, try a new material type. Really, anything that prevents you from making excuses is I think, useful for sparking inspiration. And even if it's just putting some scribbles on the page and trying to find a way to turn it into something in a Rorschach test type technique. Like, what does it look like? What will it take to get it to look like this other thing? I don't think that there's anything stopping you except for you. So don't feel discouraged. Don't say, oh, I'll never get there, I'll never be this. And not everything needs to be hung up in a gallery. A lot of things aren't meant to be hung up. And it's a very private and personal journey. And it can be that for for some people more than others. And sometimes it's okay to just forgive yourself and say, I'm not making anything today, we're gonna take those strategic breaks. And then that'll give you the extra wind under your sails for when you are soaring and you have all this inspiration and you have all this energy. I think that it's so good to just breathe, focus, and try your best to enjoy it and relieve that pressure.
Enjoying it is the main thing, because again, inspiration isn't something that should be chased, it's something to be embodied. And inspiration is a part of you. And so it's not this like, you know, some people, they live their lives for the next high, right? And that's just addiction, which can take many forms. And like, if you're just waiting for the next big trip and that's what's going to start my inspiration, and I'm waiting to start school and that's what's going to, you know, inspire me. And, you know, we can have all these things that we set up for ourselves. But again, it's like, if you're constantly waiting for something to start, then you're distracting yourself from just being inspired with whatever is in front of you. Because sometimes, you know, maybe life isn't so interesting for you right now. I know people could probably look at our lives and be like, that you guys are kind of boring. Or some people could look at our lives and be like, wow, I wish I had this. So it's really just about like having your own awareness and your mindset. And it's like having the awe to look at everything and just be so grateful and happy and like being inspired by the simplest of things. Even if things aren't working right now, what am I going to focus my mind on? What am I going to really capture and captivate within my day to day, so that, yeah, I am maybe waiting for this one trip or this one, program to start. But in the meantime, what can I do to be grateful for what I have now? And that is inspiration at its finest.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too.
Yeah.
Finding various ways to get in touch with the present moment.
Yeah, that's all it's about.
Yeah, just experience this moment. And thank you for experiencing this moment with us right now.
Thanks so much, guys.
I'm former US President Barack Obama and signing off. Thank you so much.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Yes, we can.